Story 1. A week ago was the last time I saw him. I hug my dad every time I see him. I love my dad dearly. Story 2. About a week ago I surprised him and threw my whole body on top of him, whispering let it happen while he struggled to get away and covered his ears. But that is just our dynamic relationship. Story 3. Honestly, never. I last met him in 2007 when I was a kid. My dad was a manipulative, abusive asshole. I'm glad he's not in my life anymore. Story 4. Earlier this evening, he comforted me after I lost my baby. Story 5. 2017. He died in 2018, so I will never be able to do it again. Hug your dads. Story 6. Probably right around 1 year ago. He passed away on January 26, 2024. Story 7. He abandoned us for good when I was 2. I hugged my father-in-law at Christmas, so I'm good. Story 8. I do not remember ever hugging my father. It makes me sad that he was so standoffish about it. I hug my sons every time I see them. They need to know I care for and love them. Story 9. This morning I am really lucky. Thank you for posting the reminder. I appreciate you. Story 10. It's been a while. Probably sometime before my dad told me I was out of his life. As a father, I make a point of hugging my children several times each day. There is always time for a hug. Story 11. Around 2009, I begged him to stop drinking. He did not. Story 12. About 6 months before he died in 1982, he allowed hugs. After that, his bone cancer made being hugged too painful. Story 13. It's been forever. Oh my God. Let me go break that cycle. Story 14. I am a 45-year-old man. I have 1 daughter. I simply cannot understand this thread. Are there really so many people out there who have not had a normal father? I tell my daughter 15 times a day that she is the love of my life. I get really homesick when I am forced to spend 1 to 3 nights a month away from home for work. I do not know how I would be able to carry on living if I were not allowed to hug her every day. I consider myself to have a full social life with friends. Dinners 3 to 4 times a month and vacations of 6 to 7 weeks a year with different friends and family. What kind of strange relationship do fathers have with their children in your country? Story 15. I do not think I have to be honest. I moved out of his place 2 months ago. He is done with me and I am done with him. I now live with my uncle. Story 16. Tonight I said goodnight to my father and told him I love him. I gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and we parted ways for the evening. I am still a young adult and live at home, and I am lucky enough to get the occasional goodnight hug from my father. I will be hugging him extra tight for you all tomorrow. Story 17. Sigh. He passed away 4.5 years ago. I miss him so much. Story 18. It was near Christmas. My dad and I were never very open about our love for each other until a bit over a year ago, when he said goodbye on the phone by saying the awkward phrase, I love you. I do not know what made him choose that moment, but ever since we always say I love you when we hang up, and we have awkward hugs when we say goodbye in person. Even a year later we are still not good at it, but it does not matter. Story 19. I have never met him. My mother had me as a teenager and he abandoned the relationship as soon as he learned she was pregnant. He has never wanted anything to do with me. Story 20. It was probably 2013, before he went completely off the deep end and started treating me like garbage. We do not talk anymore. I do not envision hugging in our future either. Story 21. The last time I saw him was Christmas Eve. I always hug my dad goodbye before I leave. Story 22. August 19th, 2024. He passed the next day. I really miss him. Story 23. A couple of days ago, he brought my son home from school for me. He is the best. Story 24. Yesterday, he followed me home because I was scared to walk alone. Story 25. Laughing out loud. I do not think I have ever hugged my dad. He is still alive and very much part of my life. Maybe a brief side hug about a year ago. Story 26. This afternoon, he came over to help my husband lift a few heavy things and put them in our garage. My 18-month-old loves to give group hugs, so she, my dad, and I hugged, and I gave him a separate hug afterward. Story 27. who I call my dad, Thanksgiving weekend. My alleged but not scientifically confirmed biological father, about 36 years ago. Story 28. I hugged and kissed him as he lay dying, and again after he had passed. It was February 2024. Thank God for him. He was the kindest, purest soul this world ever knew, and I was grateful to have him as my father. Story 29. This afternoon, after work, I went to visit him and my mom. He is 75 years old and was diagnosed with cancer about 5 years ago. I hug him every chance I get. Time is precious. Story 30. About 2 weeks ago, I went to my parents' place for dinner. I got a great hug from my mom and dad as I left, with 2 meals worth of leftovers. Delicious. Story 31. December 27th. After reading these comments, I really want to give him another hug, and to hug my mom and everyone I love. Story 32. Last summer, before I flew back home, I hated living so far from him. He was living in a place he loved and deserved to be happy. Story 33. September 12, 2014, was the day he passed away. He, on the other hand, always has his arms around me. Story 34. Today my middle kiddo was in a Missoula play. My parents came, and my dad slipped me $20 to pay for our tickets. It hurts him to sit for long periods, but he waited the whole hour to see his 6-year-old grandson on stage. My mom let my wiggly 3-year-old sit on her lap for the whole show. I hugged them good night. My parents truly are the best. Story 35. I am going to hug my dad. It has only been a couple of weeks, but reading this thread makes me want to do it now. Story 36. Probably 17 years ago he moved cross-country and I could never afford to visit. Dad died about 14 years ago. He committed suicide. It is getting harder to remember his voice. I have a couple of pictures and no videos. God damn it, why did I click on this before gonna sleep? Story 37. The last time I saw him was in 2020, right before the borders closed. He died in 2021, 3 days before my daughter was born and 1 month before my son died. I knew my son was sick, but my dad had not been sick. I was later told his heart was broken because my son was so ill and he could not protect him or me. He did not kill himself, but it was so sudden and strange that I find myself thinking of it as him slipping away early, taking a backroad shortcut to reach the afterlife before my son. To be sure there was someone there he knew, watching him for me until I can get there. Is that mental? Sure, but I am mental at this point. Story 38. 2 weeks ago was the last time we saw each other in person. I will be meeting him again this weekend, and we will probably hug at least twice. I was blessed with one of the best dads on the planet. I do not think I could have asked for anyone else. Story 39. The last time I saw him was 16 years ago, when he drove here to meet his grandson. Story 40. The last time I saw him was when I dropped him and my mom off at the airport about a month ago. Story 41. Almost 40 years ago, I hugged him at his job and told him I loved him. That night, he had a massive heart attack and died. Story 42. 3 hours ago, I made him a stew, and my husband and I bought him 7 Isabel Bloom statues. Story 43. The last time I saw him was about a week ago. My dad is one of my favorite people. Story 44. For 4 years before he passed, I hugged him every night as I went to sleep. Story 45. I cannot, for the life of me, remember. I remember him being sucked up into that tornado. However, I did nothing to help him. Man of Steel, also known as Superman. Story 46. Apparently, the last time I saw my father I was about 4 years old, which would have been in 1970. He has since died. Story 47. My wedding was 5 years ago, unfortunately. I still see him almost daily. He has never gone out of his way to hug me. Story 48. On his deathbed, he lay in a coma for 3 days, waiting for me to return home so he could take his last breath. Story 49. He cheated on my mother while she was pregnant and left her before I was born. He almost killed her by pushing her off a moped. Unfortunately, my mother died of cancer at age 55, and he is still alive but never tried to contact me. I am a 36-year-old woman. I am married, have 2 children, and a successful career. I do not care about him. I have never met him or seen him in person. If he were in public, I would have walked right past him because I do not know what he looks like. It is very sad. Story 50. 38 years ago, he passed away in February 1987 at 66 years old. When I was 26, he lasted only a year and a half after a cancer diagnosis. He had retired at age 58 after 38 years as an educator and administrator. 2 years later, following serious theological and other studies, he was ordained a deacon in our Ukrainian Catholic eparchy. He came to Canada from Ukraine when he was 9 years old. Gosh, I miss him. Story 51. Biological. Never. Fuck that dude. In law, the last time I saw him, I loved that dude. Story 52. 8 years ago, he was on his deathbed. Yes, I miss my dad very badly. Story 53. My dad sits in the kitchen to eat when he sees me in the living room. Huh? Story 54. Thankfully, it was this past Christmas. He dropped me off at my apartment and gave me a big old hug. He said, "No, love. Please call us if you need any help. I love my father and am grateful for him. Seeing him get older chokes me up, but I enjoy those hugs. I wish he could stay forever." Story 55. I will meet him in person for the first time this October, so that will be the time. Story 56. I found out this afternoon that he had died several years ago, when I was pregnant with my daughter. Story 57. My dad died in August 2018. He was a really loving man but somewhat stoic and did not outwardly show much affection. When he was in the hospital and visiting time was ending, my sister and I got up to leave. I do not know why. It was not something we ever said, but I turned to him and said, "I love you, Dad." He said, "I love you too. I know I do not normally say it, but I love you." My sister and I looked at him and said, "We know, Dad." At 7:30 in the morning, I received a call from the hospital telling me to get everyone together and come in because he was fading. He died that late afternoon without saying another word to me. The last thing my dad ever said to me was that he loved me. I consider myself very lucky for that. Story 58. I do not have a single memory of hugging him. I saw him hug his new children, though. Story 59. I love my dad and he loves me. He is not affectionate in the slightest. I am 32 and he is 66 this year. It has been about 5 years since we hugged, just after I gave birth to his first grandchild. Hugs are not a regular occurrence, so I cherish them. Story 60. About 15 minutes ago, my dad is my world, and I cherish every minute with him. Story 61. July 29th, 2024, was his birthday. 13 days later, he died by suicide. Story 62. The last time I saw him was in the hospital in 2006. He died a year later, before he could meet his granddaughter, who was born a few months later. I miss him. I love you, Dad. Story 63. 2013 was the year he died. He was 91, which is not a bad lifespan. He was a member of the greatest generation. Story 64. My grandpa passed away on Monday. His funeral is tomorrow, so I will probably give him a big hug today when I see him. Story 65. I do not remember. I was never a big fan of hugging as a kid, and now it would just feel weird to hug him. Story 66. 5 years ago, about 4 hours before he passed away from cancer. Story 67. This morning, I felt like my dad hugged me, his daughter, more than my boyfriend hugs his dad. Men, please hug each other. It's healthy. Story 68. That was probably a month or so ago. I don't see him much, and I don't have the best relationship with him, but he still tries to hug me every time we see each other. Story 69. I literally cannot remember, which is why I hug my kids every day. Story 70. Yesterday, before I left for my mom's house, I think I should have hugged him a little more though. Story 71. Friday, January 10th, 2024, about 12 hours before his passing. Story 72. I never did. He was physically abusive, so I tried to avoid getting too close. Story 73. Never. He could not get over his disappointment at having a daughter, which ultimately caused my parents to separate on my first birthday. After years of his comments about my gender and about child support payments, I stopped visiting him when I was around 12 or 13 years old. Story 74. Now that I think about it, I cannot remember. To be honest, we were never really comfortable with each other. I feel very uncomfortable hugging him because we are not close at all. We are more like co-workers than father and daughter. Story 75. He died in 2002. I was 18. I'm not sure when I hugged him before he died. I just don't remember. It was probably at the end of May that year when I graduated from high school. That was 22 years ago. Story 76. The last time I saw him was at Christmas. I do talk to him about 5 times a week, though. Story 77. 2 years ago, I returned from the airport after being away at college. Story 78. He turns 80 on Wednesday, and I got to see him today for a few hours. I will see him next week to celebrate his birthday. I never take this for granted. He is my favorite person in the world, and I would be lost without him. I read some of the comments and am so heartbroken for all those who are not in this position. I do not know what I will do when that day comes for me. I dread it with every fiber of my being. Story 79. At the beginning of April last year, he was in the hospital. We lost him in May. Story 80. It has been some time since I saw him last, probably 7 or 8 months, but I hugged him then. I call once a week. Story 81. I have never hugged him with affection. Story 82. It was a Monday. It had to be in elementary school sometime in the 1980s. I don't remember. I am 47. We get along very well. We just don't hug it out. Story 83. He has been dead for 13 years, and we did not get along for most of the 15 years before that. The last time we got along was maybe 30 years ago at my wedding, and that was for show. Story 84. It will be 2 years this coming April. I knew I would miss him, but I was not prepared for how much. Story 85. Probably when I was 8. I remember it well because I got the sense that he did not want a hug. I hug my girls all the time. Story 86. About 3 days before he died, I would give anything for one more. Story 87. I never got or took my one and only chance, and I never will. I do not regret it. Story 88. About 3 years ago, I had to move out of the country without my parents. I really miss them. Story 89. A week ago, I reflected on a relationship that had been rocky for years, during which we mostly did not speak. Over the past year, we have mended our relationship. I did not realize how much stress I had been carrying by constantly hating him. I am glad he has come to accept and respect me, and that we can have a great relationship now. Story 90. The blood-related man died about 42 years ago. My stepdad died 17 years ago. They are both gone now. Story 91. Honestly, I don't recall. I haven't seen the man in over 15 years. Story 92. I don't remember. I haven't seen or spoken to him since 2015. Frankly, I don't care if he's alive. Laughing out loud. Story 93. Maybe a few months before he died in 2019. Regardless, it doesn't feel like I missed my last opportunity to hug him. Story 94. I have no idea. 30 years ago, maybe. He died last November, though. Fuck him. Story 95. I saw him last in early 2024. I will see him again in a couple of weeks, and there will be plenty of hugs. Story 96. I cannot remember clearly. I must have been under the age of 5. My parents divorced and my father abandoned us. It felt horrible to watch every other child with a father I did not have. Story 97. 14 years ago, probably a few days before he kicked me out onto the street when I was 15. Story 98. December 26, 2024. When I was home, I felt grateful that our relationship has improved over the past 5 years. I am grateful for that man. Story 99. Wednesday night we went to get pizza and catch up. I hadn't seen him since New Year's Eve, when I spent the holiday with my dad, my fiancée, his girlfriend, and friends and family. He's 76 and I'm 46. He's the best. Story 100. That was about 17 years ago, but I cannot fault him for that. He is dead, so it would be difficult to do otherwise. Story 101. At 7 in the morning on the day he died. Not because he was dying. His death was unexpected. It was simply because he was my dad, and I was hugging him goodbye. I will never regret that the last words my father heard were, "I love you." Story 102. I have not seen my dad since my daughter's first birthday. She is 5 now. Story 103. 5 months ago, my mother told me he was drunk while driving, and I still do not like him. Story 104. Several times today, maybe 5 minutes ago as I write this, I told my parents I love them. You never know how much longer they will be around. Story 105. He died approximately 20 to 30 years ago. Story 106. That happened last week. He is one of the most unappreciated people I know. He works very hard every day and comes home to an unappreciative, grumpy family. Story 107. My wedding day. We're not the buggy types. Well, I am, he is not so much. Story 108. We joked in 2006. That was the last time. He died in 2016. We were not a hugging family. Story 109. 3 years ago on a Tuesday when I was 29, I said goodbye for the last time. Story 110. About 17 years ago, or roughly a year before the estrangement, I can't recall the exact date. Story 111. I do not think he believes that men should show affection toward one another. Story 112. Right before he died unexpectedly, he was leaving, and I hugged him goodbye. I did not know it would be the last time I would see him. Story 113. I am not sure I ever did. It has probably been at least 30 years. My parents split when I was 3, and he became the stereotypical every other weekend dad, only around when it was convenient. Our relationship is more like that of a close family friend rather than a father. Story 114. I pulled the plug 8 years ago. The prior events occurred about 10 years earlier. Story 115. I do not honestly remember. I think that since I was a child we drifted apart. We rarely speak because I live abroad, and we never had a close father and son relationship. Story 116. Before I found out that he had sex with his sister while married to my mother, ejaculated on the basement carpet almost every night, kept his never-clean sex toy in the same drawer as his toothbrush, which led to an ant infestation, and faked prostate cancer and multiple heart attacks to try to stop my mother from leaving him. He has become the family joke. None of us want anything to do with him because his pornography addiction ruined his life and he values it above everything else. Story 117. The last time I saw him was in October because I cannot be sure he will still remember me the next time I visit. Story 118. I have never met him. I reached out once, but he did not respond. We had a few conversations, and when I asked if he wanted to meet, he said no. I have not spoken to him since. Story 119. A few months ago at a funeral, I did it to keep the peace, but the emotional symbolism behind it had died long ago. Story 120. A few weeks ago, while saying goodbye before I went back to college, I told my dad I loved him. Story 121. Yesterday, I bought my first car, and he hugged me before we parted at the petrol station. I'll probably hug him tomorrow as well. He's coming over to get a ladder he borrowed from Mum. Story 122. He walked out on my mom and me about 15 years ago, when I was only 6 months old. I've seen him only 3 times since then. He wants nothing to do with me or my half-sister, who was born a few years later, simply because we are girls. He is a piece of shit. Story 123. This past Christmas, he was a single dad who raised my brother and me and taught me everything I know about being a good parent. I wish I had seen him more often. Story 124. Yesterday I was put in a chokehold from behind for the second time ever. We both practice martial arts, so that is just how we roll. Pun intended. If you know, you know. Story 125. Sometime in February or March 2023, he came to visit my then 18-month-old. He died in a collision between a motor vehicle and a bicycle about a month later. I miss him. Story 126. Every time I see him since I moved out, I hug him. The first time I did, he said, I can't remember the last time my kids hugged me. Story 127. Maybe when I was a kid. My father and I didn't have a good relationship. We lived more like roommates than father and son for most of my life until he passed away 19 months ago. Story 128. Every time I see him, it feels like last week. My dad is my best friend. He is the Calvin to my Hobbes. Story 129. I visit him as often as I can. The last time was when I visited for Christmas. Story 130. A few days after Christmas, he dropped me off at the airport. Story 131. This occurred around October 20th, and he died 4 days later. Story 132. The last time I saw him was 2 months ago when I was visiting home. I am 44, and he is 79. Story 133. I don't know. I don't think I ever did. It's not part of my life. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.